footsteps, almost too closely. Like, you're given ample time to explore the UAC and learn about the experiments they're running, but then you face a cataclysmic event that forces you to trek back through the halls of the facility, learning and becoming properly equipped as you do so. It's Half-Life to a T. I mean, I guess you can play Super Turbo Turkey Puncher 3 in this game. Can't do that in Half-Life. If nothing else, the game's opening is a phenomenal demonstration of the engine's technical prowess. The lighting can powerfully accompany any mood the designers want to set. A pentagram can suddenly illuminate a dark room, while the hideous colors of hell seem to pop. And the shadows are strong. So strong, in fact, that they are actually part of the game's design, much like the flickering lights or sudden power outages in the original Doom. Here's what I mean. The shadows in this game are so thick that you'll need to use a flashlight in order to see anything. This incentivizes exploration in a pretty unique way, and while you're checking dark areas for goodies, you never know what might be lurking in there waiting for you. Doom 3 is a survival horror game by trade, and it does a lot with that moniker. There's no music in most instances, meaning the only sounds to accompany you are the ambient sounds of the UAC and the footsteps of nearby demons. It keeps you on your toes, and you'd better be prepared, because the combat of Doom 3 is a nice blend of old school Doom and grounded Resident Evil-esque combat. Your starting weapons are intentionally underpowered for most of the game. The pistol has a low firing rate and does minimal damage, and the shotgun needs to be almost crammed right down a demon's throat in order to be most effective. Yeah, I know that's how shotguns work, but it's not nearly as lenient as it was in the original Doom games, where you could use it as a rifle if you wanted to. If you're even a touch too far away from your enemy, it'll take a few shells to kill them. Even the SMG is pretty weak. It has a large clip, but it chews through ammo. Although the game won't overwhelm you with enemies, relying on these weapons, which you'll often need to do, makes micromanaging multiple demons, especially in dark and claustrophobic spaces, much more difficult. However, the caveat to all of this is that they are excellent for conserving ammo for your more powerful weapons like the chain gun, rocket launcher, and plasma rifle, so that when you're faced with the more difficult and harrowing battles, you'll have awesome weapons to rely on as a reward for toughing it out. This keeps the game tense in most areas, and because you need to push forward in order to deal the most damage with weaker weapons, you'll be putting yourself in harm's way more often, which incentivizes thorough exploration with your flashlight. My favorite aspect of Doom 3's survival horror focus actually ended up being the flashlight. I mentioned how effective it is in checking the shadows, but there's something else that keeps things spooky. In the original game, you couldn't have your flashlight and gun equipped at the same time. This means that in battles that take place in almost pitch black darkness, you'll have to rely on the muzzle flashes of your weapons, the sounds a demon is making, and your own memory in order to survive. This is something that makes Doom 3 a uniquely anxious game to experience, and I mean that in the best possible way. The BFG edition attaches the flashlight to your weapons, which tears down a lot of the horror the darkness in Doom 3 created. So I'd personally recommend playing the original version on PC or Xbox. That is, if I were actually able to wholeheartedly recommend this game, because I don't think I can. Doom 3 may have an excellent combat loop, but it doesn't carry the game to the end. These industrial hallways that I've been showing you make up about 90% of the game. You occasionally have to do some pathfinding or solve a puzzle, but most of the game is just killing demons at the same pace in the same locations. The hell levels are great, but you have to wait until the end of the game to see them. The story feels pretty thrown together, with none of the nuance that made Half-Life the game that it was. I can't remember the name of a single character from this game, and I can barely remember the events that led up to the Marine entering Hell. It feels like a story only existed so that they can string together gameplay elements and levels. At first I thought the PDA could have given me more of a reason to become invested in the game's story, but it ended up being one of the worst aspects of this game. Essentially, there are audio logs strewn about the world of Doom 3 that contain passcodes for ammo lockers. The lockers themselves are immensely useful as they contain supplies, but you can only find out the code for unlocking them after listening to each individual audio log entry all the way through. It'd be nice if you could listen to them and commit them to memory as you venture towards them, but oftentimes the audio logs will be placed right in the vicinity of the storage locker, forcing you to sit around and wait for the code to be spoken. It'd be nice if the audio logs were either more informative as parts of the game's lore, or if they were the only pieces of story you could really get, like in Metroid Prime, but most of them discuss things that are completely irrelevant to you or your current situation. Imagine if Doom 3's different areas, not that there are many different areas, all told a story you could watch unfold in Remnants. such as the corpses strewn about, broken machinery, and escaped demonic experiments in the vein of Half-Life's questionable ethics chapter. Audio logs would inform you of what happened in the area, giving you context for the new enemy you'd find yourself up against. Kind of like the Phazon mines in Metroid Prime once again. But unfortunately, none of that was attempted. All of this makes Doom 3 a very dull game. I wish I could be more excited about slicing up a powerful demon with a strategic use of the Soul Cube, or feel satisfaction when I manage to clear out a dark room with nothing but my intuition to guide my bullets. But the truth is, the game's best ideas are flattened and stretched across its runtime like a rolling pin to a firm ball of dough. And what's saddest about this game is that its best elements had already been done before, in Doom 64. Released by Midway Games in 1997, Doom 64 was a terrifying take on the core gameplay of Doom. Its enemies were powerful, its lighting was consistently eerie, its art direction and setting offered anything but comfort or familiarity, and its levels would confuse and squeeze the life out of the player, often using more complex scripting than the original Doom games to change the structure of levels as you find keys and press switches. New problems begin to unfold before your eyes. The levels in Doom 64 are so intricate. There are so many paths to take and so many routes to remember, and no two levels have the same shape. And while you're exploring, the strongest demons storm through the halls, hunting you down. You'll hardly know what to expect. The game is constantly trying its damnedest to crush you under the weight of its winding labyrinths and brutal combat. And while you're trying to stay alive and make it through levels, the game's atmosphere doesn't give you much hope or pushback. It is unnerving, to say the least. You're walking through abandoned castles and cities in hell, with ambiguous environmental storytelling to back them up. One of my fondest memories with this game being spooky as all hell pertains to the level Dark Citadel. You have this central lap that you run with faint light coming from the windows, and there are rooms adjacent to this hallway, but in those rooms are bodies strung up on the walls, dart traps, a library maze, and enemies waiting around corners. Some of them just wander these dimly lit halls. It's really creepy. It just goes to show you how effective minimalistic storytelling can be in Doom, and what Doom 3 could have done instead. Adding to the horror, you also have the utterly petrifying soundtrack, courtesy of Aubrey Hodges of Doom PS1 fame. The drones in this game are harsh, industrial, and really fucking nasty. One of the songs even samples a baby crying. Aubrey is really good at making me squeamish, and I really miss his work on Doom. When you pair this significant upgrade to the design of Doom with Doom 64's knack for horror, you get what I believe to be the true Doom 3. It manages to introduce genuine fear into Doom without compromising on its DNA. It pushes you to earn that carnage that the series is known for allowing the player to unleash. If it's pushing you, then you push right back. And that is what Doom is all about. It's not perfect. It has a ton of levels, which puts a damper on its effectiveness as you inch closer to the end of the game. These levels are all well designed, but it becomes harder to appreciate them as you go through the same motions over and over again, especially because this is the third Doom game in this style. Truthfully, it may have been a result of the dry-cut formula that many shooters were drawing from, which, as I discussed, was changed and built upon in future FPS games. That, and due to the length and challenge of certain levels, being stripped of your weapons and sent back to the beginning like the original Doom games is more frustrating than it is justifiably punishing. There's also an enemy that shoots out lost souls like a machine gun, so I'm gonna have to automatically dock points off of this game. It's easy to draw comparisons between Doom 64 and Quake, because Quake accomplished similar things. But Doom 64 does so much with the limitations of its engine, making it an impressive game for totally different reasons. Oh, and one final thing of note. Many people played this game back when it came out, and one of those people was a future game director named Hugo Martin.
I wish Hugo Martin was my dad. Hugo Martin was my dad. Was my dad. Was my dad. Wish Hugo Martin was my dad.
It was the first Doom game he had ever played, and he appreciated how it kept the player on their toes. He'd take the lessons he learned as a fan and developer of games with him when he eventually joined id Software and reintroduced Doom to the world, along with Marty Stratton and the team. However, it would take quite a while for that to happen. After Doom 3, the series entered its second hiatus. Doom 4 was alluded to and announced between 2007 and 2008, with John Carmack inferring that the gameplay would be more in line with the classic Doom games. It then entered development hell. Both fans and developers at id agreed that the game that it was shaping up to be wasn't Doom. It was a cinematic, scripted, story-driven shooter that drew unfavorable comparisons to Call of Duty. And not many people at id, including creative director Kevin Cloud, were feeling very confident in it. The game was being developed during a relatively bleak era for shooters. The Call of Duty series, which once had honorable roots, became an annualized franchise delivering game after game of the same old shit. At one point, it delivered cinematic and scripted gameplay with unparalleled finesse, and I'll cite Call of Duty 4 as a prime example. Modern Warfare had something to say about war, and it contextualized its combat and its pivotal moments in such beautiful ways. But eventually, this passion dried up. Very minute changes were being made to the core gameplay every year, and that intelligent yet straightforward level design framework was being milked dry. You'd be hard-pressed to find die-hard fans of Call of Duty Ghosts or Advanced Warfare. That said, the franchise still makes a shitload for Activision, setting records with every new game and generating billions of dollars in revenue every year. And of course, everybody wanted a slice of that pie. It got to the point where other franchises were being corrupted by the late 2000s, early 2010s FPS checklist. Quake 4, the Turok reboot, the later Battlefield games, Medal of Honor. Ugh, that one still stings. First-person shooters dominated a quarter of all video game sales by 2016. These games were gonna print money regardless. But in the end, they all borrowed mechanics from each other, meaning that new games in the genre blended together. What the genre needed was a reintroduction of elements from the past. The old-school FPS formula was malleable, as proven by the games that evolved from them. In an oversaturated market of games all trying to do the exact same thing, the old had an opportunity to become new again. And to be honest, Doom and its 90s contemporaries always held their own charm, despite being the first of their kind. As shooters evolved further and further away from finding keys in non-linear mazes, and introduced concepts that became mainstays like reloading, regenerating health, and roller coaster-esque scripted level design, these old-school shooters slowly began to have a place in the industry again. And the talented people at Machine Games would be the first to prove it. Wolfenstein: The New Order was a game changer when it came out. It managed to elegantly blend old and new FPS tropes into one coherent game. You had maze-like level design with health and armor pickups to find, integrated into a stealth system that kept encounters dynamic. A skill tree that rewards you for finding your own playstyle, rather than mindlessly allocating skill points to different branches like so many other games from the 2010s. You could carry as many weapons as the designers allowed, and dual-wield pretty much all of them. But you also had mechanics like ADS and reloading to maintain the game's frantic yet calculated pacing. And best of all, you had the story. They managed to incorporate this emotional narrative into a game that is unabashedly and hilariously violent. The game was brilliant, and it proved that there was still fight left in the FPS genre. It came out in 2014, which was also the year that Doom 4 was finally re-revealed at QuakeCon. The FPS renaissance was upon us, and we were about to find out why. Doom 4 was retitled simply and boldly as just Doom, and it received a standing ovation at QuakeCon 2014 behind closed doors, before finally being shown to the public at E3 2015. I had my reservations, as I'm sure many of us did back then. I thought the glory kill system was hokey, and I wasn't sure of the gameplay itself, but I appreciated the return of the key cards and puzzle box level design, as well as the game's sense of humor. Regardless, all we could do from then on was wait. About a year later, the game came out. I didn't have a PC or a console that could run it at the time, but I started to hear great things about it. The game wasn't just an okay reboot. Supposedly, it was good. Really good. Suddenly, I had an overwhelming urge to play this game. Was Doom finally back after all these years? I finally acquired the hardware necessary to play this new Doom game later that year, and without hesitation, I began playing. And then I beat it. And then I beat it again. And then I went for every upgrade. And then I went for every collectible. And then I went for every achievement. And then I was replaying the game just for the hell of it. Needless to say, they nailed it. But how? Well, let's take a look.
They are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse. Rip and tear until it is done.
The game's first moments are highly revered, and for good reason. It wastes no time whatsoever, it makes a statement, and it's really damn effective in showing you the ropes. You awake in a coffin with a curious mark on it, you smash a demon's head in, and suddenly you're in the game. You're shooting shit up. The game illustrates just how powerful you are with the Praetor suit being decorated with candles, and your helmet carrying that same mark from the coffin. The same coffin that people were bowing down to. The game tries to communicate narrative to you, but this new Doom guy isn't having any of it. In every Doom game, your motivation has simply been to kill demons. You've never needed anything more, not even in Doom 3. But of course, they are the first to poke fun at needing justification for that matter. This moment right here bridges into one of the sickest title drops in history.
I'm willing to take full responsibility for the horrible events of the last 24 hours, but you must understand. Our interest in their world was purely for the betterment of mankind. Everything has clearly gotten out of hand now. But it was worth the risk, I assure you.
This introduction was a huge deal when the game first released, and it still holds up pretty strongly today. The team understood that first impressions were everything, and rather than bloating the player's first minutes with tutorials and exposition, we understand exactly what we need to do, and we have assumed the role of the Doomslayer when his reactions are in line with ours. Smash that Argent energy! Fist bump that action figure! Yeah, we're one and the same. While parts of the game are contradictory to its stance, such as moments where they lock you in rooms with characters and you're forced to listen to them info dump context on you, a lot of this is masked by the game's cognizant tone and personality. Your character couldn't give less of a shit about the ramifications of his actions, and why should he? All he knows is that the UAC is harvesting energy from hell, and that's no good. In reality, what context did we really need for Doom back then? None. You'd only get bits and pieces of story as you'd clear each episode, and that was all you really needed. Want more fuel? They killed your beloved Daisy. Rip and tear. Doom 2016's intro harkens back to that philosophy in the best possible ways. This was refreshing not just for a Doom game, but also as a reprieve from the plentiful amount of heavily scripted shooters that were so far up their own ass, the only thing they could give you a taste of was shit. For the first time in years, all you really needed was a gun and something to shoot. Speaking of shooting, combat is also very effectively introduced in these first moments, and it's here where I learned how crucial glory kills were to this game's design. These were an adaptation of a mechanic that existed in Doom 4's early days, and they were sped up significantly here. Essentially, when you shoot an enemy enough, they'll stagger and start to glow, signaling an opportunity for a melee finisher. Now before I say anything more, these glory kills are a joy to watch, that much was clear to me from the very beginning. Considering how tongue-in-cheek this game is over just about everything, including the events of its own narrative, these over-the-top finishers are creative, hilarious, and positively satisfying. They are slapstick in nature, as if the demons are made of Play-Doh, but there are so many of them and they all carry the momentum of the game despite briefly taking the control away from the player. You can stomp on demons like they're Goombas, break their jaws, sweep their legs, slit their throats with their own fucking teeth, even rip them in half completely. A massive kudos to Doom 2016's animation director Shinichiro Hara for leading the weighty and impactful animation in this game. And they don't just exist in the game for spectacle's sake, hell no. Every time you land a glory kill, you're guaranteed to be rewarded with a pool of health. That may seem like a small detail, but in heated battles, killing demons in this manner could make the difference between life and death. So when you're low on health, you'll need to force yourself to look for a demon to kill. This organically gets the player thinking about strategy and target prioritization in a fight. When you're low on health, you'll need to avoid the tougher demons and sort out the smaller ones for health regen. You constantly need to be on the move, and you constantly need to be making decisions. The glory kills are effective and gratifying in this way, as they force you to stay in the action when you're in danger, rather than allowing you to run from it. Chainsaw kills serve a similar purpose, although you are rewarded with pools of ammo rather than health, and you need to be clever about your usage due to the thing's limited fuel supply. Every demon will take a different amount of fuel to kill, and you should only have this thing on you when you need it most. Another element key to this game's combat are the enemies themselves. If there's one thing Doom 3 did really well, it was differentiating attack patterns between enemies. The Pinky was terrifying in that game because it was much faster and jumpier than you could have ever hoped to be, so you'd absolutely have to prioritize them before you could think about running. Doom 2016 fleshes out attack patterns even more so. We've come a long way since the days of different wandering sprites shooting at you. Imps run and jump unpredictably, Hell Knights will deliberately chase you down and deal significant damage with their slam ability, soldiers exploit their defensive capabilities to catch you off guard, Pinkies will charge straight into you and throw off your combat rhythm if you aren't paying attention, Mancubi will melt you if you stick too close to them, and Barons use a mixture of strategies to trip you up. This will innately get you thinking about weapon strategies. A Mancubus may be powerful, but they are mostly stationary, so you don't need to worry about using weapons that stagger often. Barons may be asking for some strong firepower, while an explosive shot from the shotgun could satisfyingly clear out groups of common fodder. The super shotgun is an incredibly reliable way of leading a full frontal assault, even if it leaves you vulnerable to everything else. And if you're afraid of being overwhelmed, try keeping your distance with some rockets or a long shot from the Gauss cannon. Varying your weapon usage also keeps your ammo supply up across the board, which further enables you to raise hell. And not only that, but cycling through your weapons during an encounter with a stronger enemy can also deal far more damage than just sticking to a single one. Take a look at this. A Hell Knight comes out of nowhere, I jump away from its first attack, and then rocket, SSG, Gauss cannon, boom, he's gone. Sure, I was able to do this because it was just the two of us, but it serves as a testament to not only this game's beautiful grasp on arena combat, but also how well knowledge of your arsenal can serve you in a fight, which are both core elements at the heart of the Doom series. This is especially apparent in boss fights, which quite literally boil down to shooting it until it dies. You're not made of ammo, and they'll constantly try to catch you if you ever slow down, which in and of itself is an extension of the game's arena combat to begin with. The Spider Mastermind in particular is pretty tense. There are periods where touching the floor for too long could spell your end, so you have to deliberately focus on shooting that weak point, while platforms crumble underneath you and you desperately try to stay afloat. Again, not unlike what the rest of the game has you doing. You can also unlock weapon mods to further diversify your playstyle, and you can upgrade the ones you like the most. There are many ways to turn the tables, and it all comes to a head in the game's final level. Waves of enemies closing in on you in swarms, power-ups for when you desperately need a change of plan, and some rapid-fire decision-making all make for some of the most liberating moments in Doom. Truly, you shouldn't have any reason to be afraid at this stage. With everything the game has taught you, the demons should be fearing you. And what better way to empower the player in this moment than with some of Mick Gordon's soothing melodies. I've made an entire 45-minute video on this topic. I honestly consider it a companion piece to this retrospective because Mick Gordon played a significant part in defining this new era of Doom. He essentially created his own instrument to channel a unique type of hell into the music. He transformed a brief that asked him to forego guitars because he realized how important they were to Doom, and therefore he would emulate guitars with his new Doom instrument, mix a chainsaw with a low 9-string guitar riff, and eventually sneak it in wherever he could to give the player the psychological push they needed. This only scratches the surface of what techniques he used, and the soundtrack absolutely deserved every award it received. Once again, lots of discussion in my video on the music of Doom, but the sheer anger in its composition completes the game's flow of combat. You're jumping around the arena, switching weapons rapidly to micromanage a ton of enemies at once, and throwing yourself at them in dire moments to regain your health. The game has beautifully introduced you to its rhythm, and staying on top of everything and utterly desecrating demons is glorious. Violence in video games can be used effectively in so many ways. You can use it as a means of disturbing the player, making them laugh, or as a form of payback. When you are faced with a challenge so fierce, or an enemy so daunting, completely turning the tides and tearing them limb from limb will flood the brain with dopamine as you acknowledge that you were finally able to win. And Doom 2016 absolutely nails this. It's you against the armies of hell, but that's just fine. Combat is only half of what makes this game great, though. The game's level design takes us back to what made Doom the game that it was. You find keys across levels and pick up new weapons along the way. But things are a bit more segmented this time. Although you'll still find enemies placed across each level, this focused combat I've discussed usually comes from the game locking you in an arena or gore nest before you can proceed. These are focused skirmishes that control the game's progression and difficulty, but there's more you can do as things ramp up. You can upgrade your weapons and their various mods with points accumulated from each level, and these points can be allocated in order to decrease recharge times on mods, and otherwise modify them for the better in order to kill demons faster. Let's run through how these points are unlocked. First of all, you can get them from doing designated challenges in each level. Some of these challenges actually loop right back around and feed into the weapon points once more, as they ask you to find toys and upgrades around the level, which already fed into your growth in combat. Others are about doing specific things in combat, which can either be really fun challenges or killing a Mancubus with a pistol. Yeah, some of them trail a little too far off from the game's focused design. Sure, I'm gonna enjoy going for specific glory kills or hunting down every secret, but I'm not gonna enjoy going for ridiculously specific tasks that break the pace of the game. It doesn't really matter though, because there are plenty of other ways to keep your weapon points up if you're not into the challenges, such as health, armor, and ammo upgrades, weapon mod drones, and praetor tokens for upgrading your passive abilities like climbing, movement, radar capabilities, and more. And then you also have rune challenges, which upon completion, unlock an enhancement that you can equip and level up by meeting criteria pertaining to said rune. This continues to bring variety and strategy into a playthrough of this game, as you customize your loadout to meet your playstyle's needs. Basically, everything you do in this game feeds into your growth in combat in two significant ways. Once through the weapon points that you can rack up through everything you do, and again through the things that you are actually doing, because they contribute to a different kind of tangible growth. It's an absolutely incredible and succinct progression system that makes playing through the length of Doom 2016's campaign feel wholly satisfying. It also helps that the levels in this game are rad, some of the best I've seen in a shooter of this ilk. The Foundry is a tall, multi-layered complex that asks you to scale it for keys and gore nests in a non-linear fashion, and it's absolutely crammed with collectibles. Kadingir Sanctum has plenty of secrets too, and it is interwoven as you explore more of it and find the colored skulls. The Argent Tower is fun to climb, but it's the ring around the tower with collectibles and upgrades that completes its design. Although things tend to drag toward the end, especially if you've been going for all those weapon points and you've mastered most of the game, combat still keeps things fresh, and the act of exploring is always fun thanks to how clever id continues to be with the locations of their secrets. Doom 2016, on the whole, was one of the most concisely designed games of that year. And not only was it a return to form for the series, it was an incredible reintroduction of what made first-person shooters fun during their earliest years. Like Wolfenstein: The New Order, it blended old and new FPS sensibilities seamlessly, and instilled creativity in the genre once more. That same year, we got Overwatch, Titanfall 2, Prey, and not long after, New Blood Interactive came along and put out Dusk, A Medieval, and more. Whether you were looking for something retro or something modern, shooters were back in business, and id Software weren't about to kill the momentum that they had created. Doom Eternal was announced at E3 2018, and as you could probably imagine, I was ecstatic. I just wanted more of that excellent gameplay loop they'd created. Bethesda's decision to support 2016 through multiplayer DLC genuinely puzzled me, as Deathmatch was not the part of the game that critics and players were raving about. I suppose they didn't feel they needed to push single-player DLC due to the existence of SnapMap, which allowed players to easily publish their own custom levels, but its creation features were fairly limited. I really wanted to see how id could expand on the solid foundation they built in 2016, but I guess they saw a full sequel as a more viable option, and it didn't take very long for me to understand why. A couple months later, at QuakeCon 2018, we finally got to see footage of this game in action. Hugo Martin and Marty Stratton, once hoping that people would be receptive to their new take on Doom a few years prior, appeared confident in showing their new game off in front of their newfound fans. They are so passionate about the work they do, and we'll talk more about that later on, but in this moment it was a treat to see that they were as excited as we were to see the Doomslayer rise again.
I love this. It's like it's Excalibur, and you'll notice there's a little thing on the end there. We call it the meat hook, and you're gonna love what you could do with that thing.
It's totally my new favorite.
They were right. The elation in their voices, coupled with the frenetic movement-based gameplay, made the wait for this game even more painful. It was delayed past its original November 2019 release date, finally arriving on March 20th, 2020, the same day as Animal Crossing: New Horizons. The explosion of crossover art and animation that came out of that made the global circumstances looming over us hurt a little less. Both provided me with that dopamine rush for very different reasons, and made for one hell of an evening, let me tell you. It's a moment in Doom history that I don't think we'll ever forget, and it was made all the more special by Doom Eternal's title screen theme. For one, both provided me with the global circumstances looming over us, heard of art and animation that Animal Crossing made the global by Doom Eternal's title screen theme. As I outlined in my video on the music of Doom, 2016's soundtrack called back to the first 3 Doom games on occasion, and adapted those riffs for that signature Mick Gordon style. But the Icon of Sin's whistle from Doom 2 went untouched in Eternal, bridging into a harsh return evocative of the guttural chainsaw guitar combo of the previous game's title screen. It was an amazing way to welcome a Doom veteran back to the series, and things would only get better from here. Once again, no time was wasted. You're just plopped into the game, and you must go forth and kill demons from there. Our first level is aptly and respectfully named Hell on Earth. And what an amazing first level it is. It is even more effective at communicating everything than 2016's intro was, and yet it retains that resentful, no bullshit mindset. Doom Eternal may have a greater focus on its storytelling, but that doesn't mean it isn't fully aware of how little upfront storytelling actually matters to this series. Like 2016, the Slayer's actions once again accurately reflect how most players should feel about what's going on, and these moments honestly speak for themselves.
The beast, does he not